I should ask, where do you feel the organization is at in terms of its pitcher development? Because we've seen obviously Tanner Houck and Cutter Crawford make significant steps forward in terms of what they've seen in terms of where they've been in the first half. We've seen Brian Bayo at least taking the ball and making adjustments and learning sometimes through lumps. At the upper levels, where we're seeing maybe a Richard Fitz, taking steps forward at times. Some of the guys, whether through injury or underperformance, other top pitching prospects haven't necessarily. How do you assess where the organization is on the pitching front?
Yeah, so I think we tend to take this top-down look, right? And there's been some early wins with our major league staff, and absolutely, Andrew and the rest of the group and the pitchers themselves deserve a ton of credit for, not just being open-minded and curious, but buying in and executing on all of the things that Andrew and the rest of the pitching group have been pushing. But I also think that there are some changes, some developments kind of under the hood that may not manifest for some time. The job that Justin Willard has been doing, our director of pitching, starting with players at the academy in the DR and in Florida, I think has been really solid in just kind of instilling the right movement patterns and strength and allowing these guys to mature physically. There's definitely been a push to build out stuff, both pitch shapes and velocity. And I think we're seeing some of that through the organization. And then there have been some, individual wins that are worth calling out. Certainly, Fitz, over the last couple of weeks, the velocity's ticked up. Some tweaks to the pitch shapes. Sandlin, the return in the Schreiber trade since a brief stint on the IL with a forearm strain, has been really, really good over the last couple of weeks. We're seeing upper 90s velocity, a wipeout breaking ball. And then obviously before he got hurt, Perales looked like he had really burst onto the scene. And there are some other players who have had some challenges, guys like Wickelman Gonzalez, who, was a kind of prized pitching prospect coming into the season, has had some struggles. Hopefully we can get him straightened out. But some others who have emerged as well, whether it's Early, Dobbins, Weehunt, a handful of guys that I think you can point to and say, we're starting to lay the foundation for a pitching development pipeline.
All right. Well, we all know one of the biggest looming free agents is your manager, Alex Cora, right? And assuming no matter where you are projection-wise, you're probably not going to trade him because you don't have control over him after the season. You've both made it clear that the conversation will be after the season, right? That has been said by both. He's done, obviously, a remarkable job with a young team, keeping them focused, keeping them going. Any thoughts of re-engaging in a dialogue with him before the end of the season or at any time before or after the trade deadline?
Yeah, I think Alex and I decided early on that the worst possible outcome here was for, this situation to become a distraction. And, I think he deserves a ton of credit. I think the organization deserves credit for not allowing that to become a distraction and to allow the players on the field, their progress, their development, and ultimately the games that we're winning to be the story. That's the way that it should be. I think that's the way that both of us want it to be. And so any conversations that that would take place, would take place just between Alex and me to ensure that to be the case. But I think the thing that is worth highlighting here is the job that he's done in terms of managing, a ton of turnover, overcoming injuries, that overseeing the development of young players in the big leagues, and ultimately having us positioned where we are right now, which is 9 games over 500, currently holding a playoff spot, and looking forward incredibly optimistically to the next few months.
I always find there's there's the micro and macro to an extent as you approach a trade deadline, right? What the team is doing on the field will ultimately dictate where you go, how you improve, or if you sell, right? But there's also sort of where the organization is, where the franchise is. And it's an interesting time right now in Red Sox Nation, right? The fans, they just want to see you spend. I think if they had their way, you would just tell them you're going to spend as much money as possible and everyone's going to be happy, which is obviously not the goal. The goal is not to have the highest payroll. That's not what you set out to do. But does that factor in? Where does sort of this point in time of the Boston Red Sox, does that factor into anything, or do you have to make sure you're blocking that out and solely focusing on what this group of players is doing on the field right now?
Well, I would take probably those comments about fans just want us to spend a step further and say, I think fans just want us to win. I think if we were to win, which is our goal, that is our mission here, and by far our most important North Star. I think generally the fans in Boston support that. And if we were to spend a ton of money and lose, my guess is they would be frustrated, and rightfully so. I think the most important thing that I can do is anchor myself to what I believe is best for the organization. And what's best for the organization is often balancing what's best in the short term and what's best in the long term. And it's a really difficult line to straddle. But this is a really difficult job. But I think, one thing that's important to call out here, I think, is that we all kind of have different jobs, whether it's the ownership group or me or Alex and our coaches or our players, right? I think our players are rightfully consumed with doing everything they possibly can to prepare to win tonight's game. I think Alex and the staff are doing everything that they can do to, review the information, to understand the matchups, to think through the right pinch hitting opportunities and bullpen matchups in order to give us the best chance of winning a game. Almost independent of who the 26 guys are on the roster in the clubhouse on any given day. And my job is to try to equip them with the best 26 players that we can find. And so, when you appreciate that kind of nuance, everyone has a job that they can do. And while there's interactions across all of us and a ton of communication, I think to some degree that those jobs are almost independent in a way. And I think that can be refreshing.
So I'll ask on that front. You're living it now, right? Like, you are commuting from home and you are in the office all the time around people who care about these wins and losses, right? Like, it's a little bit different than when you were remote with the Cubs and you were checking in with Jed Hoyer every day. But nonetheless, you're not like that. It's different. It's different being in the environment. What is this season like? What is it like? Kind of living with the wins and losses on a day-to-day basis, and being back in that environment as you were during your playing career.
Yeah, well, there's a unique vibe around Fenway, especially when the team is performing well. It's a really, really exciting place to be. I think we saw, I can remember the kind of back-to-back Yankees and Phillies series where we played well. And the stadium was electric and felt like, the fans had really come out to support what they were seeing on the field. And it was just an incredibly fun, time to be around the stadium. Now, I've also seen the other side of that where, we've had some bad losses and played poorly, especially early in the season where we're making a ton of errors. And this is, kind of the last place that you would, you'd want to be hanging around. And so I think that's why it's important that I, try not to get caught up in the day-to-day wins and losses in terms of decision making. Like, I'm absolutely invested in this team and in our wins. And I think everyone, you could walk into the office and you would know if we had won or lost the day before. But to the extent that it impacts decision making, I think that can be a pretty poor environment in order to make consistent, disciplined decisions. So I think it's important to kind of separate those two things. Now, if you were to glance up in the suite after a big hit or a bad error, you would see a reaction from me. But I have to quickly kind of transition out of that and be a little bit more disciplined when it comes to making decisions around the team.
Will you ever we got about a minute left. Will you ever go full Billy Bean and just turn away from the game, not let yourself get caught up in the moment? Or does the fan still come out of you during the game?
Yeah, I don't see myself ever getting there. I try not to have to get up and go to the bathroom in the middle of a game because I don't want to miss a bit. I'm not saying that's the best way to operate, but it's where I am right now. And I think at the end of the day, what I will always point to is the fact that, there is such a passionate fan base here. There are such high expectations. That's why nobody wants to miss a pitch. That's why people enjoy coming to every single game. And the opposite or the alternatives, apathy, disinterest, those are far, far worse. So it's a challenge that I welcome.